give a thumbs up and provide a comment, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of this content. So my next project is going to be a bowl. So I have a birch log that I cut down last spring. I didn't do anything special with it. I did put it in a bag of sawdust just to slow the drying rate down. And you see the end did crack. I didn't do anything special to it, didn't seal it, and there's obviously some cracks there. But I had some extra, so I just cut the ends off. And very pleased with what I found. Birch is an interesting wood. When it gets moist, it will develop these lines, which is called spalding. So you see these black lines here in the wood. They make for very beautiful features in a bowl when done. Actually, spalted birch is probably my favorite wood to work with. So I'm quite pleased with the way this is spalded. And I'm very interested in seeing what the bowl will look like. So we'll get this on the lathe and we'll take a look at it once we start to turn it up. When it comes to mounting on the lathe, I've got a couple choices. I can use my worm screw or I can use a faceplate. With spalted birch, sometimes the wood can be a little soft, so I chose to use my faceplate rather than the worm screw. It gives a much stronger hold. The other option would have been to glue it on with a waste block, which I'll end up doing later anyways. So now that it's on the lathe, I've started just making it round on the outside, which helps remove some of the weight. You'll notice that I have the tailstock up against it. I usually do this until I get the weight reduced. Makes it a little safer. Here you'll notice I'm switching back and forth between my carbide tool and my ball gouge. The bowl gouge is a little bit more aggressive sometimes at removing wood, but sometimes I find with the carbide tool being sharp, especially when it's out of round, can be more effective. Definitely later on, I will end up using the bowl gouge because it often gives me the best surface. Here, just pointing out some of the beautiful markings to the wood. You can see these black lines, which again are characteristic of the spalted birch. Makes for a beautiful wood. So you'll notice here there are some small cracks, although when I tested the moisture on this, it was down to 10%, which I thought would be plenty safe to prevent it from cracking. But here around the pith, the center of the tree, there is still some cracking. You can see here. If I rotate it to the opposite side, you can see some here. I put some glue in it, some CA glue, super glue. It's continuing to crack. I see a couple more cracks. I'll coat those up, which should prevent them from cracking too much more, at least from spreading. And then once I start to thin the bowl out, we'll fix those up and you'll see how I do that in a minute. But in the meantime, you can start to see some of the beauty of the bowl here with these black lines. Like I mentioned earlier, it's one of my favorite woods to work with, or at least one of my favorite woods to finish up. One of the problems is I did put a recess in it here. Because spalted wood is not real strong, I may reinforce that with a little glue so that when I put my chuck in it, it doesn't chip out. But we'll see once I get to that point. Here you'll see I'm working the inside of the bowl with my bowl gouge, and you can see from the size of the chips it's cutting very well. Okay, we're getting down, getting close to the bottom of the bowl. Still a little thick here on the side, so I'm going to thin it down a little bit more. I might switch to another tool for that. This one is my bowl gouge is cutting well, but it's not giving quite as smooth in some spots, so I may take my carbide to that, but I just need to go a little bit deeper. I measure that by just sticking the tool in and keeping my fingers as a gauge, and then bring it out here. So I'm here, I need about another quarter to a half inch deep, and like I say, it's just a little thick, and that'll just have to be thinned out a bit. People often ask me how long it takes to hollow out a bowl. I've been, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes hollowing the inside of this out, if that. So when everything's going well, I can rough it out pretty quickly. And then I'll spend some time getting a nice smooth cut and thinning the walls out. Before I go too much further, I'm going to have to pay a little more attention to these cracks. When the bowl was big and solid, the center was filled in, I didn't have to worry too much about them. But a crack that goes from here to here on the outside of the bowl, I don't feel it on the inside, but a crack that goes that far, as the walls get thin, I'm going to have to address, because obviously it's a substantial piece of the side of the bowl, so I will have to address that before I go too much further. I'll continue until I get to the bottom depth that I want, and then I'll address those. And that gave me a nice smooth edge there, as far as I want to go there. I'm going to switch to a different tool, because here where the bowl changes shape, I've still got full thickness, so that's going to come down a bit. I'm good down near the bottom, so it's just in this section right here where I've got a bit of a reverse angle. The bowl comes up and then changes direction. That part needs to come down, but it's getting pretty good. I see I've got a bit of tear out right here. I'll get rid of that now, and then I'll finish it on the inside. Time to put a little more glue in these cracks. That just gives me stability while I'm turning. As I mentioned before, I'll fix these up later. Their final fix. For now, this is just to keep it from spreading and to keep it from falling off the lathe in pieces. Which should be a bad day for everybody. This tool is a gooseneck, so it's specifically meant to get around a corner like this so that I can come in and get in here. I'll be honest with you, it's not one of my favorite tools. I purchased this. It is carbide, which I like my carbide tools, but the problem I have with it's round on the bottom. A lot of them are square, flat, so you can rest it on the tool rest. Problem is when I get it in here around the corner, I'm operating a little bit blind, and there's nothing to prevent this tool from turning, which can cause a catch. It would be much better if it had a flat surface there, but it is what it is, and it came in a kit. I wouldn't recommend it, but it's the best tool for this job. Again, you'll see the tool turning in my hands a little bit. I think with the hard and the soft wood, it tended to catch a little bit, and it was a little bit harder to control. I did end up abandoning that tool. Here you'll see I'm sanding the inside of the bowl, just using a piece of sandpaper, at least for the first cut. I've got some fairly coarse paper. Sometimes the paper works best on the inside. Now I'm switching to the outside to power sanding. Power sanding is better for removing any scratches. If you just use paper and go in one direction, you can end up with some scratches that are hard to get out. Here working the inside, I have a tool that is designed to work on the inside of bowls. A little hard to get the drill inside there. Here I'm applying Minwax sanding sealer. I like to do this after the first sanding, which just helps stiffen the fibers up a little bit, which makes it easier to sand going forward, especially on the soft wood that's spalted like this. If you remember earlier, I mentioned that I had some cracks, especially around the center of the bowl, the pith area. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking my Dremel tool and I'm widening those cracks out. It does a couple things. One, it makes it easier to repair them, being a bit wider as opposed to a small hairline crack. It also helps reduce any stress in the bowl, which will help prevent future cracks. Now that I've taken my Dremel tool and widened these cracks out, what I'm doing now is taking some glue, putting in the hole, and then actually filling it with coffee grounds.
Coffee grounds actually makes a good filler for these cracks because it's very similar in color to the spalted dark sections of wood and also sands down nice.
So here it is with the repair with glue and coffee grinds put into it. So I'm going to suggest to you that if you look hard, you may be able to find it there, but it blends in very, very well with all the other colors. Uh, it is difficult to find it. I still had a couple low spots here, so I went back and filled those in. I think this side's even a little more difficult to find. Uh, once I once I sand these down a little bit more, they'll fade even more so than the way they are now. But I think the repair turned out quite nicely. Other than that, I'm all done. Uh, I've sanded just to the first grit. I need a little more sanding to go, but everything is shaped now, and just a little bit more sanding, and we'll be done with this bowl.
I didn't show all the sanding. I started at 120 grit, sanded my way up to 600 grit. I'm just putting the finish. Once I've finished sanding to about 600 grit, I like to take some shavings and rub that against the bowl to burnish into the wood. It provides a bit of gloss and just gives you a very smooth finish. You may notice that I stop quite frequently and just feel the wood with my hands. Your hands are actually very sensitive. They can detect small differences in surface roughness. I also use it to measure thickness, and I'll do it sometimes when the lathe is turning. I know some turners like to use caliper gauges, but I find the fingers are pretty good and sensitive at being able to measure that. Whenever I finish sanding, I like to rub it down with some denatured alcohol. That just helps remove any sawdust, especially that might be trapped in the surface itself. Just cleans it up nice. Here I'm applying a friction finish. I apologize, I flipped up on the screen pretty quick. But the finish I'm using is OB Shine Juice, which is equal parts of denatured alcohol, boiled linseed oil, and shellac. It's a friction finish because you apply it with a paper towel and you rub it onto the wood with the lathe turning. And it needs to get hot, so you're pushing fairly hard and hold it on as long as you can because it is going to heat up and your fingers are going to get hot. But the longer you can hold it there, the hotter it gets, the more it'll shine. Typically, I apply 4 or 5 coats, and I think with this I did apply 5. It's not appropriate finish on all woods, but on a smooth bowl like this, it works out quite well. Here you can see it after it's had 5 coats of the OB Shine Juice. It's starting to shine, quite glossy. Here I'm just parting the bowl off. I did end up gluing a waste block on the bottom of it, and I just cut it off, and then I'll smooth it out later. Now that I've got it removed, I reverse it in my chuck on a faceplate, and then I'll just remove the rest of the waste block that was glued on that I couldn't reach. It's inside the insert that I had, the recess I had cut on the bottom of the bowl. So here I am applying my logo to the bottom of the bowl. I have a branding iron which I heat up with a propane torch and then just burn it into the bottom of the bowl.
Here's the finished product. I think it turned out quite well. I'm pleased with it. I'll zoom in here in a second and show you up close. But you can see the finished shape here. It's kind of urn shaped, I guess. Comes up and then curves back in with the lip on the top. It's 7 inches in diameter, 4 inches high. You can see here, I'll zoom in close, you can see the spalted pattern of the birch. Again, one of my favorite woods to work with. I'll also point out there's been some repairs on this in this shot right here, and it may not be obvious right off the bat where those repairs have been. So that was the coffee grinds that we talked about earlier that were just used to fill cracks. One of them is right here. And that one's kind of off by itself, so maybe that one's kind of obvious. But there's another one right here. And it followed a natural line in the in with the spalding anyway, so it's not as obvious, but definitely a beautiful pattern overall. I'm very pleased with the way it turned out. Again, here this is a repair. This is actually not a repair, so but there is some repair on this line here. So again, it's not real obvious. There's a bit of a repair there on the top here. Not all of it, but some of it. The pattern is on the inside as well. So again, very nice pattern. I'll show you the bottom. So it has my logo on it. Oops, upside down. I ended up, the branding iron didn't burn well in the bottom of the wood. The wood's quite soft. So I burned a medallion and then glued it into place. So it gives me better definition on my logo. I just got to put some finish on that to finish that off. But there you have it, the finished product. Quite pleased with the way it turned out. And hope to see you on the next video. Please provide any comments you might have. Let me know what you think of this video. Has both live sound and some voiceover, so let me know what you think about that. Also, let me know what you think about the finished product, whether you like it or not. Some people don't care for the spalted birch, but some people do, myself included. So let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you very much.